So, as I was telling you, I'm Delores Ornia. I'm the head of quality at Product Development and Innovation at Telefonica Digital. As you can notice, I'm not British, if you didn't realize it yet. So if there is anything that you don't understand what I'm saying because of my accent or because of anything else, don't hesitate to ask me, okay? The purpose of my presentation is to share with you the experience that I've had during many years in software quality and dealing with agile projects. I don't know how many of you are familiar with quality in software. Anyone working on that work? Okay. Okay. And the first thing that happened to me a few years ago was I was working for a software company delivering healthcare software. So that means a very regulated environment, very strict processes that need to be followed if you want to sell your product, because you need to meet these regulations from software for the US, and they needed to meet all the FDA regulations. So suddenly, vice president from development, a new vice president came, and she decided to move to agile. Well, I was absolutely terrified, because we had been building a system to make sure that everything was under control, and then all these agile things came, and the first thing you think is, okay, now we are going to break anything. How can we guarantee that we are still meeting the quality requirements and the product has the expected quality and more in a regulated environment? So we started to take a look, and well, the good news is that there are ways of doing that. Later on, I joined Telefonica Digital, R&D, what was previously R&D at Telefonica. The challenge was different. At that organization, we have around 90 teams doing development, all of them working on Agile already. So Agile was already well known by everyone, with some issues, some limitations. This is something that you have to be improving all the time. But the challenge there was that from these 90 projects, more than 30 of them producing software that was going to be sold outside there. The rest were more doing pilots or research projects, etc. And each one of them had different difficulties facing quality. All of them working on Agile. So the idea here is to share with you some paths that I tried, they work, others that we didn't try, or even try and they didn't work. And yes, if you can learn from it. Software quality is not rocket science, so there is not a good or right approach to it. It's something that you have to learn and you have to adapt. So in this sense, it's very aligned to Agile. And if this doesn't work, then you have to switch. And every time, every project, every company has different issues that need to be solved. So maybe what I'm showing here won't work for you, but maybe it will help you. Okay? So this is the content of the presentation. We are going to share some basics for Agile, to see what are the things that are important to maintain in an Agile project, what are the basic rules for software quality, what are the things that need to happen. Doesn't matter if you are working on Agile or Waterfall or whatever, there are things that need to be done, and how can we mix both of them? Well, probably all of you are familiar with the Agile Manifesto. My purpose is not to give you an introduction to Agile, but just to show how there isn't anything on Agile or Scrum implementation that is in contradiction with quality, okay? Or to any other sort of project management activities that are needed to deliver quality products. The Agile Manifesto talks, that is the basic for Agile, talks about individuals and interactions over processes and tools, but this doesn't mean that processes and tools are not needed. It only means that what is more important here are individuals and interactions. Same thing for working software, over comprehensive documentation. On all these topics. There is a common misunderstanding in organization implementing agile. Many groups think that, okay, that means that from now on I need to focus on working software and I can forget about documentation. This doesn't mean that at all. It means you don't have to over-document, you don't need to document what you won't be using, but this doesn't mean that you won't have to document. So this could be a contradiction with quality practices, because for quality you need to have a document that tells you what your software is doing in order to validate it. So this is not a contradiction at all. It's just a question of how much is needed and when you do it. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. This fourth sentence is another one that could create some controversy with quality. Responding to change, there are teams or development projects that think that this means you can change everything all the time. This is not the meaning at all. It means that you have to be able to adapt and to change, but you need to know when and how. You can be changing requirements and changing software features until the last minute when you are delivering to the customer, because everything will break. So this is not in contradiction either, it's just interpretation that could create some confusion. Okay? So this is the basics for Agile. This part of the presentation comes from our Agile team in Barcelona, so are not mine, they are the experts, so I'm borrowing all of them from them. Agile, in a simple word, means common sense and discipline. Again, practices, principles, and values, make things simple and effective, and avoid waste. Another time, nothing in contradiction with quality. How do we implement the Agile ideas in PDI? We use a Scrum as the method to manage the project. Scrum is a way to manage the software development cycle. We can go later with the phases that it has and the roles, etc. And for software engineering practices, XP. Okay? These are the most common methods used in the market, by the way. I don't know if you have any question. Feel free to interrupt me, okay? Basics for Agile is Scrum grounds. There are some things that are very important to make a Scrum team working. The team has to be self-organized. They need to organize and manage themselves. This means that the old concept of project management with a manager deciding what to do and when disappears here. Collaboration. Everyone has to collaborate in the common purpose of delivering a quality product. It's a cross-functional task. All the parts of the software development need to be included in the team that is working towards this delivery of the product. Inspect and adapt. This is the part that deals with change in the terms of everything, but specifically with changes in requirements. In this part you have the development cycle divided in sprints from 1 or 2 to 4 weeks, and in these sprints you have a full development cycle itself with the requirements, code and testing, with the advantage that you don't have to wait for a year to see the results of what you are doing, but you have this period of time of 1 month or less when you evaluate what you have, and you need to have working software at the end of that phase. Okay? And at this point is when you have to review if what you are doing makes sense, or if you need to make changes and adapt your process to make it effective and to make sure that what you are producing is what your customer is expecting and in the best way possible. Prioritization. Don't waste time prioritizing everything from now until a year from now, focus on what will be done in the next time frame, a short time frame. This is to avoid waste. So you prioritize what is important now, and this is what you'll be doing. In 4 weeks from now, you will do the same process again, and you're building everything piece by piece. And time boxing is recommended to do this in periods of the same time to create rhythm between the teams. The framework, again, these cycles from 1 to 4 weeks with 3 roles: product owner deciding what to do, cross-functional team how to do it, and the Scrum Master coordinating everything and removing any obstacle that the team may have to continue working. 3 backlogs: the product backlog, that is the list of things to do for the full product. The sprint backlog is this list, but just for the next 3-4 weeks, for the next sprint. Impediments backlog, what do we have that is not permitting us advancing in the right direction in time? So someone needs to take care of that. And for meetings, sprint planning, to decide what we can do in the next product increment. Daily meetings, just to synchronize, are we on sync? What do we have for today? Do you have any problem? Is there anything we need to solve? A short meeting every day, but to make things moving, detect impediments and to progress. A sprint review, what we have done, and retrospective, how can we improve? Again, all of this, nothing at all in contradiction with quality, with having some processes or some activities that guarantee that what we will deliver at the end of a specific cycle works. I'm always thinking on projects that last many months. For short projects, like a month, that is just one sprint, things can be a bit different in terms of quality, okay, on the things that I'm going to share with you now. But for big projects, the situations that I found and the problems and the challenges with Scrum are the ones that we talk later.
Delores, can I ask
Yes.
a quick question? In a sprint, I'm slightly unclear about it. I understand you do testing of the new capability at the end of the sprint. Is it true that you fix the bugs at the start of the next sprint? Are you going to come on to that?
We can go to that later.
Perfect.
Okay, later we will see how we are injecting or managing the different testing activities in all these phases. And
Okay.
actually I have another slide that we can talk at the end.
Perfect.
That is about when you fix defects, etc.
Okay.
Okay. And we do this with the best programming practices. All these practices, what they do is they help creating internal quality, the quality of the code. With peer programming, incremental design, test-driven development, writing tests before a single line of code is written, all the continuous integration tasks, which mean that every time you check in a piece of your code is integrated with the rest of the code that has been written by the rest of the team, and all the automatic tests are run and everything is validated so nothing is broken. Unit testing, code complexity and design improvements. So all of that is what we are trying to achieve. This doesn't mean that we are doing it in all the projects. We are trying to make it happen, okay? But this would help creating or building in quality into the product. But once you have the quality built in, you still need to do some testing activities afterwards to make sure that nothing is broken. Okay, so we have seen agile practices, Scrum, extreme programming, and what we have for software quality for a long time ago is we need to manage what we do, we need to do quality planning, validation and verification activities, including all sorts of testing, trying to do this efficiently, with effectiveness, with automation, functional testing, regression, integration, defect management, continuous improvement, through metrics, really making sure that everything is measured and everything is working. This is the classical approach to quality. So how does this fit with the Scrum and Agile? The first approach that I've seen is some teams decide that since we are so good, we are writing this good code, following extreme programming techniques, and the teams are working together and they are so committed, we don't need to have any QA team working on that. We will create perfect software and it will be good enough. It's true that internal quality will be there, everyone will be responsible for what they are doing, good teamwork, but all the integration defects that happen when you put together pieces of code developed by a few people, they haven't been tested. With all the extreme programming practices, the number of defects will be smaller, but there are still some defects that can be found until you have all the pieces together and you go through the full cycle of the full workflow of the application. Okay? So at the end, what would get the customer would be something with poor quality. Another approach that some of the teams were implementing, as I told you, at Telefonica, R&D at the time, and PDI now, we have so many projects that we have a mixture of everything. So some teams already detected that they needed testers, and actually, as part of the cross-functional teams that we mentioned earlier, working on the Scrum project, we should have people expert in each discipline. So they thought, okay, definitely we need someone working only in QA. This would be a good solution if the projects were somehow perfect, we didn't have any pressures from the market, the person responsible for delivering the product would have to meet with deadlines that sometimes are not feasible, and what happened is that the part that always suffers quality. It's, okay, we are implementing, let's see if we can try to implement this new user story in this time frame. Let's test just a bit, and the tester would have a lot of pressure and wouldn't have any support because his manager was exactly the same person who needed to deliver because of commercial commitments. So he was feeling alone, and the quality was suffering. So just adding testers didn't work either. Okay, so let's move to the classical approach and do all the tests at the end. This could be okay if we were talking only about small development projects of 1, 2, 3 weeks, because the delay that you would have by adding testing at the end would be short. If you do this for a development project with 5, 6, 7, 10 sprints, what you would do is finding very basic integration defects too late, and you are losing all the agility. We are not working anymore on Agile. This is a situation that we face very often when we depend on third parties that are delivering software to us. We don't have the chance to get their piece integrated with ours during our sprints or between sprints. That would be the ideal situation. You know, we have these phases where we integrate and we see what happens. If we get all the components or the other components at the end, we are losing all the agility. So, are we getting products with quality? This depends. Obviously, this is not the best approach. We are finding defects too late, everything is taking forever, and we have a few projects on this situation, and not because the internal development, but because what we get from outside. Okay? So what do we do to prevent this situation from happening? With external vendors, we are starting managing them to make sure that we are defining also phases to integrate. So we don't integrate everything at the end and we find defects too late. Internally, we have included testers into the Scrum teams. We continue doing XP practices. All the test is done, all the functional test is done inside the sprint. We have the picture, the next one, okay? Integration test is done at the end of the sprint before the sprint is accepted as done. So we have a time for integration there. It's not too long, because we are talking about integrating functionality for 2-3 weeks of development. So we are not talking about 3 years. So it's something quite agile. We are managing the defects. We are taking a look at how is everything progressing into this sprint, and also having a look at the full project. What's going to happen if we follow this trend for the final release? We do regression tests, integration tests, system tests, when there are some tasks that need to be done once the full product is built. But again, if everything has been tested already, this integration or this system test wouldn't find low-level defects. It would find only the defects that came from the specific system that we are using. And to do that, and to make sure that the testers don't suffer from this pressure, and they have something to say, and they are able to provide information to decide when the product is ready or not, without being somehow having his manager deciding what to do, having some freedom, we have created an independent reporting line. So for the verification and validation cycle, we have functional tests done into each iteration, into each sprint. We have integration tests before completion of the sprint, and this for each one of the different iterations that we have for the final product release. And we have a last phase of regression testing, system testing, before the product is accepted for GA, general availability. What you were saying about defects, there are different ways of working with that, and some teams do it in a way and other teams do it in another. For me, it's okay, both of them. It's not, as I told you, it's not rocket science. It depends on what works better for you. For me, the idea and the ideal situation that we are promoting and making sure that is happening for all the teams is that every defect found during functional test is fixed into the same release. Every defect. Then you have defects that you are finding in the last phase of the sprint, that is in here, before delivering. So we are using the rule of half day for integration tests for each week of length, the sprint. So if the sprint has 4 weeks, we're using 2 days. Every defect found there, if the severity is high, blocker, it's very critical, it has to be fixed. If the severity is lower, it's not that critical, the software works, it's not perfect, it's not something that we will ship, but it's okay, it's acceptable to keep going and to keep developing. We live with it just for integration defects, because all the functional defects have been fixed already, and they move as tasks for development for the next sprint. Okay? Is it more or less clear?
I think it is. I think the only question I then have is, if you're carrying forward a set of integration fixes, or carrying forward integration bugs, defects identified as integration, and then you've put the fixes in place as part of the first activity in the next sprint, you only really discover if those integration defects have been fixed at the end of the sprint?
No, because the validation is done immediately after the defect is fixed. We have the testing team testing and closing defects as soon as they are fixed. So it's not, testing is done all the time. If you see here, we have this cycle of testing. I think that I understand your issue. Integration is just similar tests to the functional test. is a part of the functional test that is executed when everything is put together. So for functional tests, we are testing with some things that are more or less isolated. Once from this development, sometimes we may have different teams, different Scrum teams, and each one of them is working in a piece. At the integration, we put all of them together and decide which one of the tests that we have are tested. So this doesn't mean that we will verify integration defects only on the integration testing. Every defect is validated as soon as it's fixed.
So the integration fixes, so the integration defects will be fixed and then tested as part of the functional testing?
During that time frame.
Okay.
We may have a test environment with all the software integrated and we use that environment for the validation. It depends. But yeah.
I get, all I'm trying to say is that I could see a situation where you could have a cumulative set of defects which are being fixed but then not retested quickly enough.
If this is the case, we have metrics to show that issue and we need to put resources. Actually what we are doing is measuring everything we are doing at each phase. We are measuring how many defects we have open without fixes. If there are many, we talk to development to make sure that they fix them on time. We are checking how many defects we have fixed without being validated or closed by testing. If the number is relevant, we need to add more effort in testing to close those defects. We have metrics to measure the percentage of tests that we are executing. If the number of tests that are being executed at the middle of the sprint is very low, or the last week of the sprint is very low, we won't be able to meet the end of the sprint because obviously we won't be able to validate that functionality as working. It has to be tested, it has to be executed. We have metrics also to make sure that the tests that we have are complete. We have traceability metrics with user stories to make sure that every user story or requirement has tests. Everything is done in parallel, and this is the role of the manager of quality. Okay? So if there is any of these things that, at the end, the idea is to provide visibility of what things are compromising the quality of the product. And let's see, if this is what we have and there is nothing we can do, at least the management, top management, knows the situation. There is, sometimes, everything is going well, suddenly the team, all the requirements of the product change from a sprint to another one, the product doubles in scope, and there is a chaos there, and there are a lot of defects created. We have some projects like that. What has to be done there is to stop development and have a sprint just for bug fixing. Stabilize everything, and then you keep going. But if you keep building things on something that is not working, it won't. Under Scrum and Agile, this shouldn't happen, because you should accept a functionality that has defects found that haven't been fixed. Reality is that sometimes you have pressure and you need to do this demo and just part of the functionality is working, but then the quality manager has to say, okay, let's do this demo. It's just, the objective is just to show A, B, C, but now we are going to stop developing and we're going to fix and stabilize the product. Because otherwise we will accumulate and we won't deliver quality.
I was going to make just an observation of experience this year on that, which is I think the key is to ensure that there's no understanding of later we will fix, later we will test, but that's embedded in the coding at the start. So if I put it simply, I would say rather than do 10 pieces of code and then test them and have fixes, do 2 pieces of code that are completely tested and fixed in that sprint. Because the more you leave fixes for later, the more debt you're incurring. And this problem of then you have to stop develop. You don't actually stop development, you just focus the development on getting what should have been done right the first time, put right. And the more you can't leave the sprint until it's clean, the more you force the developers to do all the quality they should do at the start, which is the key to embedding it, I think.
Yes, and actually what we are doing is we are adding some activities or some things to to make sure that we move in stability from a version to another one. And let me give you an example. This wouldn't happen, moving things that are incomplete from a sprint to another one, if we were following Scrum. Scrum says, until this is working, it's not ready. So working means it has no important effects at least, and if it's not done, you can't consider it as done in the sprint. It's something that you have to move to the next one and still keep working on it. So it's not in contradiction with Scrum. Yeah. The problem is that it's in contradiction sometimes with business pressure. And we need to deal with that. And what we are doing also with the help of the agile team is we are adding things like the definition of done or the definition of ready. When is a user story ready to enter into development? When it has the minimum definition on it, so a developer can start creating the code and a tester can start creating the tests. This is something that helps making sure that every sprint has code that is working and is effective, and it doesn't have technical debt that goes from sprint to another.
We did find though that you get the language of developers going, it's done apart from the testing. When that happens, you run up to them and slap them across the face and say, that's not what done means. Done means all the testing is done. Until then, it's not done. Don't you dare move it to the done column.
Yes,
you know,
and
there's a behaviour that's got to be seen first in people.
And this is why we have added an independent line of reporting to make sure that if something is not done, doesn't matter that the developer says it's done or that the program manager or the product owner or whoever says it's done. It's not done. And we are going to provide this visibility, and we are going to do whatever is in our hands to fix it. And if not, then we have top management that may need to decide, okay, what do you want? Do you want this product accumulating technical debt or instability of poor quality, or do you want us to stop? The answer that I found most of the times is stop.
The other, I think there's just one more thing I'd say, which is the other thing that happens is you get it's done apart from the integration bit. It's done. We put a little stub in for the integration, but the integration's there. And the more you leave those, the more you don't deal with them early, the more debt you incur, and the more you then find later there's a problem. For example, we had a web page we were showing in 0.3 of a second, and everyone was very happy. When we finally got the integration sorted, that web page refreshed in 2-3 seconds, which was far too slow. So what we realised is we'd incurred all this debt by allowing the shape of the user story to be done but not integrated. And I think it's the job of whoever's injecting quality into the Scrum, the test managers, Matt, people like that, to really, you know, use their power to say it's not done.
It's not done till it's all.
Yeah.
So one of the key observations for me looking at this is there not a risk where you're stating you're running all your regression testing right at your sort of stabilisation period? Because looking at some of the projects we've got, certainly in online, we would look to do the functional integration and regression testing as part of the CI build sort of nightly, rather than leaving the complete regression test to the end
At
of
the end,
the
no, it's not complete. Every integration and regression for the part that has been built is done also in this integration phase. This is just re-executing all the tests that hopefully they are automated, and re-executing all of them in the system environment. So this is not, so in here, apart from integration, we are doing the part of regression that it accumulates everything that has been developed until that time.
But is there any reason why you don't do that sooner?
No, we do it. We do it at each phase, here, 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 and here.
Okay.
We do it at the end of the sprint. It's not maybe. This doesn't mean that is the only time when we do regression. Regression is done here for everything that has been developed to here, here for all the software that we have. Here is an accumulative, and this is the final. Sorry, I'm missing the final. No, it's just the final where everything is in the.
Can I ask you about your integration testing? So were you able to automate some of your integration testing as well?
Yes.
And
It depends on the project,
Of course.
but we have projects with everything automated.
Even the integration and deployment into integration.
Deployment? What do you mean by deployment?
Automatically deploying your building to an integrated environment so you could automate everything. So you wouldn't need to do the integration testing in between iterations, you could do it all the time.
When you are talking about deploying everything into, we are thinking about moving all the pieces into an isolated environment, creating, is this what you have in mind?
I'm talking about the build pipeline.
Uh-huh.
What we do in online, we have a build pipeline, we have different environments for different tests. The
Mhm.
very last one is the integration test.
Mhm.
We don't deploy them maybe as often, but at least once a day. And there you test all the integration aspect as well. So you don't wait for the end of the iteration. This is something you do, and in some places it's nearly impossible because there's a mainframe somewhere. But in a lot of online projects you can do
You
it.
can do it,
And then
yeah,
you
it
don't have
depends.
integration testing isn't done at the end of the iteration. Is
It,
that
it
something you have
depends
in-
on the software that you are developing. If it's something, sometimes functionality test is also integration because you have everything there. So you are testing everything all the time. Some other times you don't have all the pieces until really because you have different Scrum teams, different groups working, and then you don't have everything until the last minute. So you should be able to do integration tests under the continuous integration plan that we have with all the tests automated and executed every time there is a new check-in in the code, if your environment and your product allows you to do that. If it doesn't, at least you should do it before moving to the next sprint. Don't wait longer. And same thing for regression. Okay? Okay? This is how we have organized each team. Each Scrum team has people from the different disciplines contributing and working on the sprint. And we have also the quality team, but we have an independent line and someone looking for outside at quality. How are we doing? Collecting metrics. Let's see if everything is going fine. So the testers are working into the Scrum teams, but someone from outside is making sure that we are not deviating, there are no pressures that really may compromise the quality. So this is what we have implemented. And as I told you, we have more than 30 projects working in parallel. So moving all these, some projects are more advanced and they work very well, others require more supervision and more help trying to implement this. And this is just okay. We hope that this is the answer. Going back to the other, my experience that I told you for regulated environments, everything is the same. The only thing that changes is the amount of documentation that you need. Instead of documenting everything at the beginning as in a waterfall, you are documenting what you need at each sprint. But the level of documentation is a little bit higher or heavier for regulated environments. Nothing else changes. And that's it. Yeah.
Very good. As currently not an agile practitioner, is this model that you've developed in digital for quality management to be deployed throughout our footprint? Are our online guys adopting this same model, or do we have a different model in the UK?
I don't know.
It's just an open question.
Yeah.
So it's very similar. I mean, I think this is just sort of examples and experience of what digital have done with agile. But if you were to look at what we're doing in online, it's not dissimilar at all.
I suspected it wouldn't be, but I had to ask the question.
But again, it
Thanks.
depends. So some of the greenfield projects we've got, like the moving on shop, where we've been able to develop the frameworks and tool sets from scratch. We have different systems and projects that are more advanced than others.
So I have a follow-up question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Which is, you've mentioned documentation and don't produce masses of documentation up front, and we certainly have this thing with Ian discussions as well. Coming from that traditional space where people are pressurising you to have all of that, what documentation do you end up at the end to describe what the product is that you're taking to market?
Requirements. Okay, there are several levels of documentation. You need to have the requirements or user stories that explain what you want to have into your product, and then you may need to have user guides, etc., etc. But this has to come. Everything has to come from the requirement. What has been implemented in the code for regulated environments is the same. The only thing that changes is that you need to go into more detail. You need to really drill down to more detail of what you are going to do than if you are working on commercial software that is not very strict, and you can document that more likely. But the documentation is the same. Following this approach or working on a waterfall, it has to be documented. What changes is the amount and when you do it.
And also, most of our teams would also, we have a definition of them for user stories, for requirements, but also for tasks. So for instance, if a developer is developing some part of the functionality or the architecture, part of the definition of done of the task is to document this on our wiki and to review the wiki. So we have this information, and at the end of the sprint you can gather all this information and have the specification of what has been done. So at least to understand, and also it's useful for the testers to understand how to break it a little bit. No? So, and also the definition of ready that Delores was talking about is because we are realizing that in many projects that the problem that we are having is that we start developing something that is very vague. When we spend a lot of time in a sprint planning trying to define what's the requirement, it's because this requirement is not well worked. So we need to make some kind of pressure to be sure that our product owners or business analysts produce something that can be done in a sprint. You understand the flows, you understand the meaning. So if you need wireframes to do that, you need them before the sprint, not during the sprint, because if not, if there are changes, they will affect the development. They will produce bugs. Because many bugs that we have is because the requirements have changed during the sprint.
For me, this is one of the depending on the product that you are developing and the environment, that many times changes are coming continuously and developers can be focused on producing software. One of the powerful about Scrum is that you isolate your team during these 3-4 weeks. No changes should happen there. The reality is that sometimes Warframe came and they changed some workflow, etc. But the ideal situation and what we are trying to achieve is nothing will change in this time frame.
I think this is the common misunderstanding in business of what agile means.
Yeah, you can change everything all the time.
Yeah. That's not the agile method, is it? The agile method is define it, lock it down, build it, test it, release it, and if you need to change it, then change it.
It could be a misunderstanding or a explanation from the people who are selling that we are working on agile and now you have the power to change. Yeah, but not all the time. And the same thing, even if you are changing just or accepting making changes at the beginning of each sprint, this will affect the final release. You can expect that changes now that will change the complete architecture won't affect the final release. So there is a need for an assessment on the impact of these changes at the end. What is the advantage? The advantage is that you are finding it today and you are making changes today and you don't wait until you get the final product a year from now and you say, I don't like it. But if you are changing it today, it will have implications. Maybe we won't be able to deliver in 6 months. It will take us a little longer.
Just an observation quickly. I think there are some key shapes of how you put information out that really help this. One is the understanding that while the sprint is on, people can work on the product backlog, but not the sprint backlog. I think that's a key thing. Once the sprint backlog is agreed, what you're doing in the sprint, whenever anyone says, I want to change something, what I would do is I'd say, great, let's go and look at the product backlog and talk about it. And is that what you want in the next sprint? And almost not have an argument about you can't bring it into this sprint or you can't bring it into this sprint, but focus them on the fact that the product backlog is the key to them getting it as soon as possible. Getting it as soon as possible means getting that right, ready for the next sprint. You're only 4 weeks away from getting it. You know, that's what you say to people. You don't say, oh, it's very negative to say you can't change anything during the next 2 weeks. And that's my point.
And that's the beauty of this whole thing is you've got, it is only 4 weeks.
Not what we are working on. You're absolutely right.
Sometimes this is used to change also wireframes and things like that because they think that this is not a product backlog. But it affects, when you're changing a wireframe, you're changing a visual. Sometimes it's not just the front end, it's affecting to the back end. And sometimes you have to redo a lot of things, and people are not aware that a small change in this wireframe can have a huge impact in the rest.
Yes.
And somehow we should assess that. We should be clear that when you're changing something, if you have a fixed date to release, you have to be very, very sure about the things that you want to implement for each sprint. So you have a lot of work to do. You have to be very, do it before, not wait till the middle of the sprint to have a brilliant idea about something.
I think Ian's got a good point there on the use of language. Though. If you tell somebody they can't have it, then they must have it now. If you tell them we'll talk about having it in the next release and you can have it 4 weeks further on and done in a properly controlled manner, then you're having a positive discussion, not a negative one. I think that's a discipline that we need to have wider than just within the online team. We've all got to adopt this stuff.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that one of the challenges that we have generally is that the requirements don't seem to firm up. You know, the customer's understanding of what they want doesn't firm up until you're almost ready to do it. And what you're doing here is getting into a discipline that says you've got to be really clear about, you've got to be sure about what you want. So you have to do your work up front for us, then do it. And if you're not ready by this date, then you need to be ready by that date.
You're giving them something they can kick very quickly.
Yeah.
So instead of waiting a year to change your mind and say, no, I didn't want it, I'm giving them it in 4 weeks.
That's the agenda.
And then they can, that's what's agile, is giving them something to kick early.
Yes,
then they can change their mind and
but
have another version.
Given that we need to deliver products on specific dates, we need to make sure that we have some milestones that limit what can be done up to that point, and from that point on. We need to have a code complete milestone. From this point on, we can't add any additional functionality to the code because we won't be able to release. This is why I was saying earlier that many of the standard program management tasks are still needed in Agile. We can work on a Scrum, we can work on a sprints, we can have all this in place, but there are things that if we want to deliver products, they have to be done. We can add changes and we can make things better, but if we need to deliver something and release a product by the end of the year, because it's the critical time for the market, we have to give visibility of implications of all those changes. They can be done, but they will affect the product. And we have the tools to do it. And sometimes we need to build the same things that I was telling you with quality, adding things, adding a quality manager, putting tester here, getting some controls. Same things for the project, for the management of the project, to evaluate the impact of the changes, to say when we have the code complete that up to this point we can't change anything at all because we won't be able to meet the final delivery, etc. There are things that are needed anyway.
I think for me one of the things that took a while to understand is because you've got a team, right, probably a tester, that's all good, but the role of a QA isn't just a tester, and that's why we call him a different nature, is to drive quality into the Scrum, and the team on the quality, not the tester on the quality, and it's to drive that improvement within inside the Scrum as a whole, and he's the person trying to drive that quality into that team. I think that's one of the things that's very easily missed by a lot of people.
This is what extreme programming is about, good development practices. And if some teams don't do that naturally, my understanding is that the quality team need to make sure that these things happen. Defect prevention. Sometimes the piece of code that you are touching is so unstable that you need to do code reviews. Code reviews could be a good practice all the time. Sometimes they are not done, but there are cases where they are a must. You can't touch a single line of code without reviewing it, because we know that if you touch something here, something else will be broken, because this is legacy code, because whatever. So there are some of these practices from stream programming that all of them should be implemented. Reality is that in all the projects, not all of them are implemented all the time, but there are cases where we, from quality, need to make them happen.
And I feel that the testers are involved from the beginning, because for a requirement to be ready to be inside a sprint, the acceptance criteria is written with the testers and also with the product managers, so they understand, and they also work with the developer to understand the scope of this functionality. So they are all involved. And there are some projects where the developers sit with the tester to understand all the possible paths that they have to create. So it's another way of pre-programming.
And also test-driven development. Yeah. We have projects implementing test-driven development. And I can tell you that they are much more stable when they complete the code. There are much less surprises. In other projects, we needed to add peer programming, basically because the team doubled from a day to another. You can double your team and expect to have immediate results. So we added this peer programming to teach new people how the product works. So these are tools, depending on the project, you use one, other. The ideal situation would be to use as many of them as possible. Reality is that sometimes you have to select, because you don't have enough energy to push for all of them. Okay. Depending on the resistance that you are getting also from development, so you have to select what is the most priority things for your specific situation, and then keep increasing with a continuous improvement. And that's it. Thank you very much.